Hello, LinkedIn and YouTube and Periscope. My name is Frank Lavinia, and I am a principal solutions architect here at ElectrifAi AI. Basically, if you're used to tuning in and seeing Noel at this time, fret not. Noel will be here next week. Let me introduce myself. My name is Frank Lavinia, and I recently joined ElectrifAi, and I am super excited to be here. I joined from Microsoft. If you're watching from my normal channels, go to the website, check us out. If you're new to me, go to franksworld.com or datadriven.tv to learn more about me and who I am. However, today I am joined on this live stream for a live demo with my esteemed colleague, John Posada. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure would. Hi, everyone. How you doing today? My name is John Posada, and I am a Principal Technology Solutions Architect here at ElectrifAi. And I actually joined about a few months ago, and I look forward to demoing to you today what we call SpendAi.
Awesome, awesome. So tell me a little bit about SpendAi.
So SpendAi is one of our platforms that we have that's really used for procurement. So what that means is it's really a service managed platform that we offer, and we offer in a manner where we're able to look at a client's specific data with respect to procurement. So for example, all the data they have for different suppliers and how much they're spending with each of those individual suppliers and how it's been categorized, as well as looking inside of those categories of what exactly is being paid for specifically for each of those individual suppliers. And the reason for that is so that we can help you with the platform specifically identify where you can save, for example, on what you're spending specifically with respect to risk, as well with respect to savings. And we'll go into it momentarily, and I'll show you a little bit more. So you have more detail.
Let me put your screen up on the big board here and hide all our fancy graphics.
Sure.
And you can tell me about this product.
Yeah, we'll do. So this is SpendAi. So as you can see here, SpendAi is really just a UI that we've created where we're using a bunch, well, not a bunch, but we're using specifically about 2 to 3 different types of predictive models on the back end to provide you with some insights. But before we provide you those insights, what we're really going to do first is we're going to look at and also extract the data that you have available from your different data source systems, for example, SAP ECC, as well as Oracle. And then we're going to grab that data. We're going to do some data wrangling on the back end, and then we're going to look at, for example, what's the date range for that data? So what's the physical year that we have with respect to that data set? So in other words, are we looking at, for example, 2020 and 2021, as you see here? Once we grab that data and we extract it from your source systems, we're going to then come back and give you some real simple and real quick metrics. So the first one being that we're going to look at, for example, in this case, for these 2 physical years, we have $2.9 billion worth of spend that has been classified. So what does classified mean? Classified means that once we've identified all the spend that you're basically paying to each of your individual suppliers, we're going to go ahead and see if we can classify those into different types of categories based on the amount of spend that you're actually spending with your suppliers. So if it shows, for example, 100%, that means we've classified every single data point from those different data sources that we're absorbing to go ahead and classify your spend for those suppliers. Now, what does that mean with respect to suppliers? Because you can see here we have original suppliers, and then we have actual suppliers. So in the back end, we're using some machine learning models to do some grouping and also classification to determine, for example, if we see certain relationships in your suppliers. What does that mean? Initially, we saw 5,069 suppliers in the data set provided, but we've been able to identify with some grouping and also some classification that there really exists 4,652 suppliers. What does that mean for the client specifically? It just means that we were able to identify, for example, if you're thinking about previous companies in the industry that just recently have either merged with another organization or actually acquired a different organization, well, now they actually represent the same supplier, but they just have different names. A good example of that is when IBM actually purchased Red Hat. In this case, it's no longer 2 different suppliers, but rather 1. And that's why you see actual suppliers right there. So,
interesting. So before you go on, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but is this a software as a service offering?
So yes, specifically it is a SaaS product, but we can also have it as a SaaS product that either can run in the cloud, and that can be either in your environment, or it can run in the cloud, but we host it for you, or it can just run on-prem. It really just depends on where you want this product to exist and how exactly do you want to consume it as a client.
Interesting.
Yep.
And that collapsing of kind of, when Red Hat got bought by IBM, that was all automatic in terms of that was the AI in action, if you will.
So great question. So with our predictive models in the back end, what we're doing is we're going to identify specific types of relations. And based on those relationships that we identify, we would be able to go ahead and make that classification. Sometimes you might have specific suppliers that really no one's ever heard of, or we might not have in our trained models, for example, specifically how we can go ahead and determine in this case whether or not it is a current existing supplier or if it's a new one. So in that case, we might do some manual classification there in the back end, but very rarely do we have to actually do that.
Very cool. I like the dashboard look. I like the experience right away. That I think is it's very visually appealing. So go on with your demo. Sorry for asking all the questions.
No. Please ask away by all means. It's a pleasure as always. So now what we're seeing is when we've actually identified, for example, and classified that spend, we can actually look at spend by category. So as you see here, these are the different categories that we actually have based on the spend that the organization itself, procurement-wise, is actually paying for with respect to these different suppliers that we have actually been able to identify as the actual number of suppliers. We also even go ahead and give you just a quick view of the number of suppliers that you actually have, and then what is the aggregation of the amount of spend that comes from that original 2.9 billion that we have here as part of the overall metrics. And something to add, since you just gave a great compliment about how the actual UI looks, specifically speaking, we call these visualizations widgets. And so you can actually go ahead and create your own widgets with respect to the data that's provided as outputs that's actually being consumed in the UI itself. So if you want to create something a little bit more fancier, maybe some pivot tables, you're more than welcome to actually go ahead and do that inside the UI itself.
Interesting.
Thank you. Well, now let's look at root cause analysis, unless you have any other questions.
I don't have any questions right now. I'm loving it.
You're digging it? Right on. Perfect. Great. So then let's go to root cause analysis. And so if you can see here on the left side, we actually have different types of naming conventions because that just identifies different types of processes or modules that we're going to provide as insight. And again, you can actually even add to that as well, different types of individual modules if you need to as well. But the root cause analysis is one of our defaults. And really what you can see with the root cause analysis, and it's just like the name actually mentions, is that we can go ahead and see, for example, okay, we see that we have that spend that represented 2.9 billion split into 2 fiscal years. We see first that we can see 2020's spend, and then we can see 2021's spend. And then based on those 2 spends, we can go ahead and say, okay, how about if I want to look at spend by commodities? Well, that's good to know because that means that I can technically classify my spend into commodities. But in this case, as we're seeing it now, it's just categories. The commodity comes in more so because specifically when we decide, let's dig a little bit deeper into the actual categories. Once we do that, we can actually go ahead and identify, okay, where is my spend actually going towards with respect to these different categories they have? In this case, commodities, you can see here that we have containers and bottles that are technically being paid for. And we can see here that we have different types of metrics that we're going to offer you. So in this case, you can see here for 2020, we spent $134.4 million with containers and bottles. And then guess what? For 2021, we actually spent $184.8 million. So this is just a great way for you to just understand a little bit more about your data, procurement-wise specifically. In this example, I'm using categories and commodities, but really it can represent, in all honesty, different types of categories, especially if we have different vendors that are more unique in the sense of what they actually sell and what you're actually purchasing for your organization. So you can think about this from the perspective of government, healthcare. There's different categories you can look at it from. So just something to keep in mind. This is just more so of the data that we have available, what we're actually showing you. So what does that mean, though, with respect to the actual data itself? Well, in this case, we saw that we can look at and dig deeper more into categories by looking at the actual commodities that represent those actual categories and the differential in the sense of the spend for 2020 versus 2021. Now we can actually dig deeper and look at that spend by actual organization. So what does this mean? Specifically speaking, what this really means is that we can actually go ahead and look at the actual spend by each organization within your organization. So if you have sub-organizations all around the world, you can see how much they're actually spending themselves specifically for each of these individual commodities that you see here based on how you've actually filtered your data. So you can see here that we can look at NOAA just really represents a sub-organization that you actually haven't been able to identify yet in your data. which goes to tell you, you got to clean your data, make sure everything looks good and beautiful so it can actually be consumed correctly. But you can see here that we have, for example, spend data for Boston Heads Office, Boston Automotive, Boston Home Care. And as you can see, these are different types of organizations that really represent different types of industries as well, based on what we're showing you here from the suppliers that we're actually identifying. Or in this case, correction, not suppliers, but the organization within your organizations. Within your organization, I'm sorry. And then you can also see that we can look at the spend category by your different suppliers. So in this case, we can see, what is the sum or the aggregation of spend between Univar, for example, here for the previous year, which is 2020 versus 2021, how much you've actually spent with them specifically, and what the differential is as an actual percent change specifically. And again, this is just a quick root cause analysis view. You can more so go ahead and actually change these widgets if you want to really have them represent what you feel comfortable and with what you want to see specifically in the data. Any questions?
No, I'm taking it all in.
It's a lot to absorb, right?
Yeah, it's great. It's good stuff. It's definitely, and I think the key takeaway here, I think, is the idea that this is a pre-built series of models. So for those that don't know ElectrifAi AI, you don't have to build it, you can buy it. And I think that's really kind of the key takeaway, is that everything you're seeing is something that is definitely within your reach. And every organization, regardless of what your whatever your industry or whatever your sub niche is that every company has to deal with corporate spending and procurement.
Yep, exactly. And this is just a quick way and a good way to actually just go ahead and represent that data and actually see how these different organizations and companies are actually identifying that form of procurement data. Because for the most part, and to be honest, most companies don't actually look at this data from this perspective. They have all these different contracts that they have with the different suppliers in which they're purchasing specific products or paying for them specifically, but they don't really have, for example, a specific repo, which is a good way to identify this as well, but a repo of all these contracts that have been stored in a specific location to go ahead and, identify exactly what's going on by actually looking at specific visualizations and just digging in deeper in your data sets.
Interesting. I like it. And this is an interesting product. So what else is in here? What else could you show me? And before you answer that, I'll hit you with a double question while my dog barks. Is how do you said something that fascinated me just now, that a lot of organizations don't look at this, and cash flow is kind of an important thing for a lot of businesses. And I think that one of the reasons why they don't do this is because this data has historically been siloed and not really visible. But what I like about this and how impactful this could be to any organization, perhaps even your organization, if you're whoever's watching, is, what does this mean for your organization? And you can save significant amounts of money by tracking it, just identifying waste. So go ahead, John. Sorry.
No. You're right. You actually very much really well detailed there in the way you explained it. But it's very much true. A lot of organizations just don't. And this is not the best way to state it, but it's very true, is they sometimes don't know any better. And for them, this is very new about how they want to approach actually, investigating the procurement side of their expenses. And what some people don't realize is you can actually save a good amount of money when you actually investigate who you're paying that money to, and also what are the payment terms that you have available. And I'm going to show you that actually momentarily, exactly how we're able to actually even dig deeper in the actual data set and really classify the different types of payment terms that you actually have with each of these individual suppliers, if not the suppliers as a group as well. So just to give you a heads up on that one, but maybe I can show you that right now.
Sure.
Let me show you the spend bands, because this is actually something that's also very important. And that is when you're looking at, all the spending that you're having with different suppliers, what some clients don't realize, and really the platform helps identify this, is that you actually have, for the most part, most of your expense, your spending actually going to smaller contract sizes. And so this is a perfect example of when you're looking at spend bands, what your actual contract sizes look like. And in this case, we're just looking at the count of these contracts, and we can realize that we're spending most of our spend in contracts that are less than $10,000. And then right after that, we're looking at mostly our spend going to contracts between $10,000 to $100,000 specifically speaking. So this is just a great opportunity to just go ahead and dig deeper into the data and just really understand where most of that money is actually going, that you're actually paying for the services that you're actually receiving in the sense of the actual products themselves.
And I think that's interesting because once you kind of, I mean, all this data exists, right? I mean, we live in more and more of an electronic kind of data-driven economy. And I like the idea of this and how, I mean, you can analyze your expenses like, oh, wow, you know, we spent a lot of money with this vendor, or we buy XYZ from several different vendors. Perhaps we can work a better deal. I mean, this opens up all sorts of different, you know, spending strategies that most AI people wouldn't necessarily think of. But I mean, if you're in the business, I mean, certainly this would be, I think, of high value.
Yep, 100% agree with you completely. And this is just a great way to just see that when you're actually able to see it live and understand a little bit better through some visualizations what's going on. It just helps really the client and the business understand what's going on with respect to their business and where they're spending most of that expense that's coming through. So to go forward from that, so here we can see, like I just showed you, the different spend bands and where most of your spend is actually going. But you can also see that based on the supplier, and for example, see the number of transactions for each supplier, what's the average amount of those transactions themselves, and then again, just the aggregation of that spend. And then to go dig even deeper, we can also even see that with respect to the categories that we have for where all that spend is going, specifically with respect to the actual suppliers and the payments you're making. Now, what I want to go to and show you is really the next step, which is the payment method, which is underneath the process. And so in the payment method, and this is what I was alluding to earlier when I was talking about the different payment terms that you have available with these contracts with your suppliers, is that you're actually able to, well, before we get to that part, actually, let me show you more so about the payment methods, my apologies, where you can actually determine how are you paying specifically these individual suppliers, in the sense of, are you paying them with checks for the most part, wire transfers, or maybe another third-party specific payment method that you're using. And then as well as, for example, when you're looking at the different categories of payments that you're making, so the categories with respect to the products that you're actually paying for, where most of those payment methods are going towards. So you can see here an example. We have about 1.27 million being spent in a third-party payment method that we're just not aware of. So that gives you an idea. Okay, you know, maybe something might be wrong here. If we're making a payment, maybe you're using something like Venmo. Should you be using Venmo as a business? It depends. It's possible. It just depends on what your agreements are and how you're making those payments. And in that case, that's just more of an opportunity for the organization to just identify and understand what's going on in the business specifically with a quick visualization or a quick visual view, if that's the case. And now to go to working capital, what I want to show you next here is where we can actually look at the actual payment terms I was just mentioning. And so the payment terms is more so about when you're going to make these payments to your suppliers, specifically speaking, you can identify, you know, what are the terms that you have set up with them. For example, are you supposed to make a payment by the 20th of the following month? Are you supposed to make a payment by the end of the next month? Or maybe you have to make an immediate payment when you receive the invoice from the actual supplier. Or, you know, what's the invoice date payment with respect to, you know, the date that you see there plus 30 days where you actually have to make that payment after the fact. So this is just a great way to see where most of the spend is actually going specifically to those actual payment terms that you have set up with the actual suppliers themselves. And you can see here that this is basically the payment terms that we have with just one specific supplier. In this case, AcoBev, just as an example. You can see here that we have different terms with this specific supplier that we have set up, and then this is the amount of spend that we have with this supplier based on the different payment terms and the contracts that we have with that one supplier specifically.
Wow, so this is really like a whole dashboard for your accounts and your accounts payable, and I mean, you can really get a good picture of what your company's cash flow is, because I know a lot of companies, smaller companies, they struggle with this, and I just love the fact that this can be a ML as a service, kind of software as a service offering that with very little kind of AI knowledge. So if you're watching this and you're coming from a procurement background, you're thinking, oh, this is great, but you know, I'm not an AI. We don't have the money for an AI thing. These are all pre-built models, which I know I've said that before, but I just want to underscore that again, because I think that's what's really make this transformational, is that, you know, with some data exploration and some work, and perhaps if we get any questions in the chat, we can kind of go through that. But what does it take to get started with this? If I owned a company, like, what would it take for me to get started in terms of work?
So really, it just depends. So for the most part, when you get in contact with one of our account executives, or we can help you get in contact with one of our account executives, the first thing we're going to do is identify really what are the pain points that you currently have with respect to, for example, procurement in this scenario specifically, and find out, okay, what kind of different data sources do you have based on those pain points? What is it you're trying to solve specifically? And then based on what you're trying to solve, we can determine if SpendAi is the right actual fit for you. And if it is the right fit, then from that point is, okay, let's determine the number of data sources you have by speaking with your IT team. And then based on those data sources that you have, then we can go from there and then put it in our backend architecture and then figure out how to set up SpendAi for you. And usually the best way to start is with a POC. We have a 4-week POC that we like to start with most clients. That way you have a good understanding of how our backend process works and how we can get you enabled to actually use the product. And if it's something that matches specifically with your needs, then we can move forward into production.
So let me stop you right there. You said 4 weeks. I'm
Yes.
gonna move my hand there. 4 weeks to get this in most cases, which I think is phenomenal, and I think that's something that really speaks to the power of ElectrifAi and this tool, and that this doesn't have to be a multi-year, multi-quarter type engagement. 4 weeks, I mean, that's 1/3 of a quarter. So by the next time your business quarter closes, if you started today, you would have this up and running for up to about 2 months or so. So you get a real handle on what your financials are going in, going out, and you can start optimizing your business basically right away. And this doesn't have to be this huge, drawn out type of project. And then boom, you get this beautiful dashboard that lets you explore the data that you already have in place and put it to use, right? Start monetizing your spend data and I say monetizing by basically cutting waste, working out better deals with your suppliers, understanding risks, because if you get certain kind of raw materials from just one source, it'll highlight that risk. I mean, what else could be possible with this? It's just amazing.
Oh, yeah, there's thank you for that. And it's true, there's really a lot of different types of opportunities that you have available, and we try to expedite it as fast as we can to help you get enabled with using the product based on the agreements that we make with you. But at the same time, it is a monthly subscription as well. So if it's something, for example, where you realize there's good opportunity for you to use and it actually fits your needs, it's on a month-to-month basis. So it's not something where it has to be a requirement of 1 year for you to subscribe to. No, we can start off with the POC the first 4 weeks. If it looks great, everything matches, we're able to come back and we were able to meet those expectations for you, then we can switch to a monthly subscription model and just go forward from there.
That's amazing. It's just such a flexible thing. And then this is what gets me excited about data. This is what gets me excited about the cloud, is that you don't have to provision new servers. You don't have to provision an entire team. This is pretty quickly, and within the span of 4 weeks, you can get this up and running. And you can have your analysts kind of dig through, well, how are we spending the money? Are we spending it on Venmo? And if you're certain companies, that might be okay, like John said, but other companies, really? Why are we using Venmo to pay our vendors? That doesn't make any sense. Are we cutting a lot of checks still in 2021? Maybe there's reasons for that. Maybe there's not. But either way, if you know the truth, you can then work from the truth. And I think a lot of companies right now, I'm sorry, John, what did you say?
No, you're right. Correct. Yep.
If you know the truth, if you can't see the truth, you don't know. I mean, maybe you're wasting money. Maybe you're not. Maybe your organization's really tight. I know we have a certain number of case studies where, one company in particular saved 7.3%. And it was a chemical company, and we're not authorized to say the name, but I mean, the 7.3% savings of a multi-billion-dollar company is a pretty sizable amount of change. And, there's other case studies, I'm sure, John, if you want to go into those now, that's fine. But if you want to know more, I check us out, go to electrify.net to find out more. You can follow us on Twitter. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to John on LinkedIn. We're both happy to kind of help you start through this process, get you connected with some account execs, and move the needle. So go ahead, John.
Nope, that's it. Thank you. I completely agree with you, and I appreciate your time and also giving me the opportunity to actually go ahead and demo SpendAi. So That way the audience has a good idea of how it works specifically. And, if it's able to meet their needs, and by all means, you're more than welcome to definitely contact us, and then we can expedite it as soon as possible. So
Absolutely, because we can't save you money until you call us. I mean, that's just, I mean, you have to contact us in order to save money. I'm moving my camera around. But I mean, you have to contact us. I mean, I'm not going to give you the hard sell. I think this speaks for itself in terms of the numbers that you can get. If you're just tuning in, we've been talking with, I'm Frank Lavinia, and I've been talking with John Posada, another technology solutions architect at ElectrifAi. And you've been watching a demo of SpendAi, a machine learning as a service model that you can host on premises, in the cloud, or just let us host it all the way soup to nuts. And basically, here's kind of the 2-minute summary. If you have expenses, and every business does, you probably don't have a good a handle on it as you think you do. So what ElectrifAi and product SpendAi will let you do is you go through, you enter in your data, we work with you to get started. And in about the span of about 4 weeks, that's 30 days, 28 times 7 is, 4 times 7 is 28. But in that span of less than a quarter, you can get this up and running, and you can optimize your spend, get a look into it, maybe even identify, anomalies, that sort of thing. And all of this is done using our pre-built models. And highly recommend. And if you're sitting on the fence and you're thinking, I don't know if I want to do this now, I highly recommend that if you want to have an impact on your next quarter and on what your bottom line is, the best thing to do, there's 2 ways to improve your bottom line. One, increase the top line, and the other is decrease your spending or optimize your spending in such a way. And as we head into somewhat uncertain economic times, the best time to get started with this is now, because you'll be able to understand where your money's going, how it's going, to whom it's going, what your vendor relationships are, where you can find improvements in that, and just you get this awesome dashboard. And if you don't like the yellow, you can change the colors, right? All of this comes with SpendAi. So with that, I'm Frank Lavinia. I'm filling in for Noel. I may be a co-host in the future. Who knows what the future will bring. You've been sharing this time with John Posada and I, who are both technical solution architects here at ElectrifAi. And any parting thoughts, John?
Thank you so much for your time, and it's a pleasure. And hopefully I look forward to hearing from some of you, for sure. And that I'll definitely see you in the future, for sure.
Awesome. So you've been watching This Week in Applied AI, where we talk about SpendAi and how to optimize using artificial intelligence. How to optimize your spend and make sure you know what's actually going on in your business. My name is Frank Lavinia, and you have a fantastic day. Thanks, John.